Hey, my name's Travis Bull Johnson. I'm running for Congress against Michelle Fishbach.
There's no money in ending war. There's no money in limiting government. To me, part of what makes America great are our small businesses, our small farms, and that's what's getting squeezed out by the establishment politicians.
That's why I say, raise cattle and not taxes. Hey, my name's Travis Bull Johnson. Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Bull. Welcome to episode 33 of Independent is Power. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty a moment ago. Some way, somehow, I managed to enter the studio twice. So it was echoing whenever we were speaking, and that would have really been a pain in the rear for all of us. So we decided to exit the studio and come right back in rather than spend a lot of time trying to troubleshoot it. So part of the things we wanted to talk about this morning was the Second Amendment. We did an interesting question or poll the other day on both Twitter as well as on Facebook. If you follow me and you're a supporter of mine, chances are your thoughts are very similar to mine on what shall not be infringed means. It means shall not be infringed. But the discussion we have not really had is, what does the right to keep and bear arms mean? For Twitter, we just had a or B poll basically going, hey, does that mean own a weapon, or does that mean the right to be able to carry a weapon publicly? And we had a pretty even split between what people believed was the correct answer there. If you go through and look at our Facebook post, I mean, I think last time I looked, it was like 120 or 130 comments. It's really been one of our more engaging posts as of late, which is great for the algorithm, I might add. But if you go through there, these are all people who believe basically as we do, but there's some variances of the answers on it. What exactly does the right to keep and bear arms mean? What brought this thought process up? What made me start thinking about this? Honestly, it was Wednesday night. I went back after had a couple meetings Wednesday, had a podcast Wednesday night, and went back to hear the taped show of Jesse Ventura, the governor's office. And on there, Jesse was talking about what he believes, or what in how his thought process has changed over time, from at one time being an absolutist, where it means right to keep and bear arms anywhere, anytime, regardless, to what he believes now is more of a, if you're at home, you have the right to keep and bear any arms you want, no registration required, nothing. I mean, it's your house. You're allowed anything, any weapon of war. However, once you go into public, he believed it was appropriate for the government to have a licensing program if you want to carry your weapon in public. And when we think about it, here in Minnesota, that's not very different from the program we already have with concealed carry. Now, he took that one step further, or a couple steps further, in his requirements for getting a license were a lot more strict than what we have now, and included not only the background check, but a psychological profile, and that I have some issues with. I don't agree with. I mean, as long as something's not popping up, that something's been put into your record that you're having some issues, I think it'd be an invasion of privacy, really, for you to have to do a separate psychological test. But what else he put on there is that if you've got that licensed, there should be no restrictions on where you carry that weapon. Because the way he saw it is an increased danger if you were to become separated with that weapon, because now it may be in a car or it may be somewhere else where it is not as secure as it would be if it was on your person. So Jesse believed that if you have that license, then you should be able to go anywhere with that weapon. And again, part of the procedures for that license was gun safety training, marksmanship training. Basically, you had to prove that you could hit what you were aiming at. But it was enough to make me think of, okay, why? Okay, when we look at and do some research, and when I started looking up, okay, what is the definition of bear? And of course, the problem you run into there is you have 10 different dictionaries and they're not consistent. You have different legal dictionaries, and they're not always consistent as well on what does it mean to bear arms. Most people I've talked to kind of agree that to keep is basically maintain and be proficient with. That goes into the portion of it being with a well-regulated militia, which is also the common thought of what does well-regulated means. It means you're trained on that weapon. It means you're proficient in that weapon. Was a common thought process. Now, when we were discussing this, another interesting concept a couple people were mentioning is, hey, you did this because at that point they believed the militia would take the place of a standing army, that the country would not need or would not have a standing army. Well, the problem with that is the Second Amendment was ratified in 1791, and the birth of the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps was 1775. So a standing army had already been in place for 16 years upon the ratification of the Second Amendment. So I don't put a lot of credence into that fact that your militias were strictly supposed to be in place of a standing army defending the nation. I'm very much a belief of the Second Amendment is twofold. One, to be able to have that reserve force to protect the nation, but it was also very much to ensure that we had an answer for a tyrannical government. I mean, it's the same reason why the Japanese said they never invaded during World War II is in their belief there was a gun behind every tree, and it probably wasn't that far from the truth. So I'd really like to see what some of your input is on here. I mean, right now we're not looking at a lot of comments, but I thought it was something worth a discussion because this is one of those issues we keep coming up to on. Fundamentally, we all believe the same, but we all have some nuances to our beliefs that keep us from being 100% united on it. I'm not going to really say Jesse changed my mind on anything because I'm a believer in constitutional carry, but I'm not going to say his idea didn't also have merits. And I can see where he got to where he got to. As a chair of the political party who helped develop our bylaws and our platform, it makes things a little bit. I have to look at it a little bit differently than say you do. Why? Because I have to come back now and look. Okay, so if I have a candidate wanting to run under our political party, the Constitutional Republic Party, whose main issue is we will back the Constitution. What does the Constitution say? And somebody has a different interpretation to what it says, like Jesse's. Would that be compatible with our platform? How much leeway? I mean, because we've always said we're going to give our candidates a little bit of leeway. But say you come forward as a candidate with Jesse's opinion on, hey, you know what? You should be able to allow any weapon you want in your house. But I don't have an issue if you have to be licensed to go in public to make sure that you know what the frick you're doing. As a party, how do we handle that? Is that an acceptable position? Because that is his belief that when you look at the Constitution, he believes that the right to bear arms means in your home and I would assume by extension, your vehicle. But anything past that, some regulation as far as where you can carry would be appropriate. And that's kind of how the Supreme Court has currently ruled, is that right now the government can do some restrictions as far as where you carry. So I think it was very much something to think about, and it's something that when the case happens or a situation happens with our party, and we do have a candidate who comes in there with a similar mindset, uh, how does that work? I mean, and let's be frank here. We're not talking about when Jesse spoke on his podcast or his clubhouse show the other night. Topics such as red flag laws, which we are vehemently against, is never came up. But you know what? It did come up on our Facebook page. Because again, we do have some people who follow us, who believe in what we're doing, who are complete absolutists. And when I say that, I mean they mean no infringements regardless. If you just served 20 years for mass murder because you shot up a school, they believe that when you get out, you should be able to get a gun again. And I'm not quite sold on that. Now, on the flip side, if you just spent 10 years in jail for a white collar crime, I see no reason why you should not have the right to bear arms. You have not abused that right. So that's where the question that comes for some people is, if you abuse that right, can it then be taken away, or is that still a violation of the Second Amendment? And we'd really like some feedback from you guys, but y'all are leaving me out here on the island right now. Let me know what your thoughts are. So we'll go on to my next topic while waiting on people to process kind of what we were speaking on. I had a conversation last night online through Instant Messenger, who she's trans, and you know what? Until last night, and she told me, I didn't know it. I mean, I've spoken to her once or twice on the phone as we tried to help a friend of hers who was going through some domestic violence issues. But it was something that just never came up in the conversation before, that that she was trans, and she was pretty upset about because of course yesterday was also the day of trans visibility, I believe it was. But again, she is not. I guess you could say she's not out as trans. She's not something that she's told most of the public. She mentioned it to me because she was very upset about the possibility of violence and kickback towards the trans community over this latest school shooting in Nashville. And she was one of the first ones to say, that person had some serious mental issues. They probably had some other things with that. But of course, she also realized that because that person identified as trans, it would come back and reflect on the entire trans community. And she was worried about going out in public with potential for violence over this. And I mean, what I want to come out here and address is, and trans is an issue that we have a lot of questions or a lot of potential conflict within, even within our followers. But if a person who is above the 18 decides that, you know what, they're not comfortable in their own skin and they want to make that change, then you know what, that's their right. Okay, they should have that ability. Okay, now where I draw some lines, if you've looked at anything went on in the State House yesterday, where they basically had these drag shows in the Capitol building, that I've got problems with. That I've got issues with. If we went out there and said we were going to have a stripper show, covering up all the little naughty bits, of course, having a stripper show in the rotunda of the Capitol, would that be allowed? No, it would be considered a hostile work environment. It would be considered sexualizing. I mean, there'd be all kind of people up in arms over it. Yet they were okay with a drag show with trans people dancing in lingerie in the State House. How is that appropriate? Okay. This isn't a question about whether trans people exist. They do. This is not a question on whether they should feel safe to come out and be in the open on who they are. They should be. But how exactly have we gotten to the point where if you're against a drag show in the state capitol, that you're anti-trans? I mean, I just don't see it. Okay, and it's what it's doing when they do stuff like that. It's basically digging that line deeper and deeper with people who are having trouble accepting this, and it makes them more and more animate, more and more loud, more and more forceful with their opinions against the trans community. So, I mean, in reality, it's setting their cause back. And I mean, and again, I'm still sitting here going, okay, if a location is not a suitable location for a strip show, it's not a suitable location for a drag show. Period. Okay, I mean, we try to be consistent in what we do. We try to be specific in what we talk about. I mean, again, and I'm all for people living their lives like they want to. I may not always agree with the decisions people make, but I'm going to be here and I'm going to fight like hell for their right to be able to make them. Uh, and Luke, I understand what you're saying. If you have to shout out that you're trans, it's for attention. And all the trans that you know don't know that they were from them. And you know what I mean? And this is the same situation with my friend. I had no clue. It was something that she didn't feel like she had to wear. But it is who she was, part of who she was. But she didn't see the need to stand up on a mountaintop. Now, at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't be proud of who you are. But again, I mean, I could be proud of my and I guess to an extent, I'll use this example. I'm proud. I'm from Louisiana originally. Okay, I am proud of my Cajun roots, but it's not something that I'll broadcast all the time. But you know what? I also don't have a problem with saying that. Yeah, I'm from Louisiana. I take pride in my Cajun roots. I take pride in that heritage and that culture. And there's nothing wrong with me doing that, but it doesn't make that who I am. It may be part of who I am, but it doesn't make me who I am. And I think that's kind of the problems we run into a lot of times is when dealing with the trans community, there's some confusion on it's not what they are, but it's part of who they are. And I think both sides need to take that step back and kind of think and kind of relate to that. Uh, uh, and again, I've been lucky enough to have some great conversations with people from within the trans community, with parents of kids who are trans. And in fact, I had that conversation again with a gentleman yesterday when I had to sit down and kind of explain to him what another friend of mine had explained to me about the medical backing in some of this. Some of this is based off of real, and I'm not going to say that's the case every case, but there are a lot of these cases with even the kids that are deemed to be trans, that there is medical backing for that diagnosis. And I'm not talking mental health backing. I am talking about physical, structural brain pictures that says, hey, this brain is structured the way that this sex normally would be. And that's kind of how they use, sometimes this is used to diagnose some of these issues. And I'm not saying that's every case, and I'm damn sure not a doctor, so I'm going off of what I've been told through medical professionals, and because they do know a lot more about it than I do. But we tend to get into this things are cut and dry, and there are some things that do need to be cut and dry one way or the other. Let me see. Yeah, okay. So yeah, but I do think it's these people. There is a right of people to be able to expect to be able to live their lives without without the fear. And I am getting a buzzing here, and I'm not sure why.
It's the computer. Your vacuum went off.
1 second.
It's over on the. It's over
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm having a problem with the other computer here.
I think. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds like my UPS is going off on my other computer. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of bring that out to the open. Is this is a fear that my operator error pad. That's usually the way it is with me, especially when we start getting technology. I mean, one of the other topics I wanted to talk about real quick is consent. This is another conversation I had with this gentleman yesterday. To me, a lot of these issues are all about consent. What do consenting adults do? Is that anybody's business but their own? I say it's not, as long as you're not forcing consent on another. And that goes hand in hand with one of our posts that we did the other day on that.
Oh,
You just shut off my internet.
I'm sorry.
All right, can you guys still see me or not? My internet just kind of went out for a minute.
Oh, I forgot.
See, I still got people on here, so I'm assuming I've still got some internet, but I've got one dot, so it's probably not the best. Oh, it's been a day of one of those days already, guys. But yeah, I believe in letting people live their life and should be free to do so. But be truthful about it. And I understand exactly where you're coming from, Luke. But at the same time, we all have our own prejudices that we need to be aware of and understand. And there's nothing anywhere that says we have to like a decision that somebody makes, but we do have to come to the realization of that is their decision to make. As a society, we can decide how we're going to interact with these decisions. But at the same time, it should never be a case where these people are feeling threatened by society. That's not freedom. If you can only go a certain way without risk of physical harm by society, you don't really have freedom. Okay, you have a mob rule, and I don't believe that's right. But I'm gonna go back through and just look at some of my other comments I had earlier as we were talking about the Second Amendment. Well, this is from Operation Get Involved, and this is something that's on a kind of a different topic than we were talking about. Phil Parrish is a gentleman who has been in the GOP for a while. He's left to come back to the GOP, but he was going to run for the chair of Congressional District 1. And the night before the election, the night before the convention, the executive committee from CD1 basically came back and said, you know what? We don't feel that you're qualified. We're not going to allow you to run. And that's a practice the GOP has gotten into in multiple CDs of you know what, we don't agree with you. We don't agree with you enough that we're going to say, no, you're not going to be allowed to run for this position. And as a chair of my own party, I mean, I look at this from a couple of ways. Of you look at our and I guess in a way we've got our own party set up somewhat similar with our judicial committee. If we have somebody who wants to run for chair and our judicial committee looks at them and says, no, you don't actually believe in the Constitution. We've got this, and this that shows you don't believe in the Constitution. Then yes, they should have the ability to come back and say, well, no, you are not going to be allowed to run because you don't represent what the principles of this party. But I don't think that's the case with Phil. I think this is the case with Phil of they're scared of him, and there should be a way for the people to be involved in this and say, hey, that's not right in this case. I mean, especially when you look at CD1 and all the other issues that they have been through, I'm just not sure that they have the moral high ground or authority to make any decisions on anything. I mean, but yeah, I mean, but again, you have these established candidates who use the super PAC money and stuff like that, and you know, this transition is great into the other thing I wanted to talk about today, and y'all poor bastards are going to be stuck with me for a little while this morning. It looks like we're going to transition into something else because yesterday, and I made a quick live about it yesterday. I was listening to the omnibus election committee markup, which basically they're talking about different amendments and so forth. A lot of y'all know I have been fighting this issue with them trying to change the definition of major party from 5% to 10% for ballot access. The one thing we haven't really drilled upon as much is when you're major party, that also means that you qualify for state funds for your campaign. It's kind of a combined fund that they split up between the eligible candidates in a race, providing you agree to run your finances in a certain way, i.e. not taking super PAC money and so forth. But you only get to do that if you're a part of a major party. You don't get to do it as a write-on or an independent or anything like that. So that was also one of the thought processes from the DFL, was raising that standard to 10% for major party access. Now, what I was not aware of when I've been fighting this battle is on the budget side, the DFL has also voted to increase that supplemental funding by fourfold, or not by fourfold, but 4 times what it was before. So not only are they trying to restrict the people they have to split it with, but they're trying to use more state money to back their candidates against everybody else. Okay, so, and that's just, it boggles my mind. I mean, the reformer, which is very much a very liberal rag who is very biased in all their reporting, actually did a article on this the other day, and one of the things they complained about was Tim Davis, the candidate for state auditor for the Legal Marijuana Now party. And what they were upset about is Tim met the criteria to get that supplementary money last year. The Republican chose to bypass it because they were doing their own fundraising. So they had to split, I want to say it was a $52,000 pot between Blaha, the Democratic candidate, and Tim Davis, the Legal Marijuana Now candidate. And they just did not think that was fair. They thought all $52,000 of that should have went to the Democratic candidate. And the fact that the legal marijuana candidate met the criteria because he actually received some funding, some donations from some Republicans, that this was not fair and this was obvious chicanery. And that's total bullshit. Okay. And now they want to take that amount of money they have and quadruple it so that they can use it to keep the other third parties below that 10% threshold. So they can continue to put their foot down on any challenges. It's up to America. It's up to the people of Minnesota on whether this is allowed to go forward. I mean, I do have a couple days ago. I was feeling pretty down about it, thinking, hey, you know what? Chances of this getting stopped are pretty much slim and none. I did kind of get a lifeline this morning because I had sent a message to State Senator Kupek in Senate District 4, which is the Moorhead area, which is fairly close to me. And I asked him, hey, what is your feelings on this? And while it's still a tepid response of I would prefer it stay at 5%, I didn't get a definite I will vote against this at 10%. It was I would prefer it stay at 5%. It leaves me hope that there is the possibility of them doing the right thing, and so it is it does leave some hope there. But I mean, when you see what the Democratic Party, the DFL in Minnesota, is trying to do to our election system, and I, guys, I try to stay out of the the specific parties, and because again, we're our own party, and the Republicans are just as bad on numerous issues as the DFL. But this is what the DFL is actually doing in our state legislature. The DFL is the ones who are leading this charge to put us to stomp out third parties. So it is very much something that we're going to call you. If you do something like this, I don't care what party you are, if you're DFL or the GOP, we're going to call you out on it. And this is very much the equivalent of fraud, of trying to reduce the people's options. The same bill that they're saying here, we need to make sure everybody votes. We need to make sure everybody's vote is heard, but only if it's voting for us, because we're not going to give them the choices of these other guys. So we want everybody to vote, but we want to make sure it's a very limited option that we're one of. I mean, how hypocritical can you get? Really? I mean, if you're a DFL representative or a DFL senator, how do you justify that? How do you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and go, yeah, this makes sense to package this together, without knowing for sure that this is very much a blatant attempt at your party to remain in power? Okay, how do you get up here and say you're here to represent your constituents while at the same time you're limiting their choices and their options for the betterment of you and your party? How does that not create a two-tier system within this state of the major party politicos and the rest of the state? Okay, how do you live with yourself on that? How do you get up and vote for that and then look at yourself in the mirror? I don't know. But you know what I do know? I do know from when I saw that markup yesterday in the House, there are 8 Democratic members that are a part of that committee, and there are 8 Democratic Party members who have no problems with doing that. And I very much encourage the people who are in those districts to call them on it, and call them up and say, you know what, this is bullshit. They haven't voted on it on the floor yet. Put your pressure on them, going, hey, this is not right. Can you legally do it? Possibly. Is it right? No, hell no, it's not. But they're going to do it unless people get really worked up about it. And that's what they're counting on. They're counting on there not being enough supporters of third parties for people to get worked up on this. They're that sure that their people who vote for them are going to go, this is what's best for the people for my best interest to keep the DFL in, so I will turn a blind eye to it. That's what they're counting on. So it's up to us to say, no, enough is enough. And as part of that, what I have been doing is we're actually running some ads right now in the 3 Senate districts that barely won. The DFL barely won, and we're trying to put that pressure on. But so if you do go onto our page and you see our post on that, please like and share it. Those likes put more pressure. Those sharing it puts more pressure. They're not going to change their mind until they feel that pressure. So we really need people to share that post. We really need to build up the likes on that post, because when they look at it and it's got 100 likes, they don't worry about it. When they look at it and it's got 1,000 likes, when you have 10,000 plus likes, now it forces change, because they don't know if those 10,000 people are in their district or not. So again, we need to spread that word. We need to share that. So please do so. I'm gonna go through our comments again here before we close out. Jeremy Joseph, Philip was another individual that I thought of for a 2024 senator possibility. I forgot to bring it up at the meeting the other night. I've talked to Philip, and I mean, I think he's a great guy, and it's very much somebody we may have to keep an eye on. Luke against trans is a lifestyle. No one gets upset when someone who is using it, P standing
down in the same bathroom. I know a drag queen and have no issue. But again, I take issue with the glamorization that it makes it a trendy new thing that all kids are doing. Had Jinko jeans in the 90s. I was able to throw them away. Transformation is not that simple. And Luke, this is definitely something that we talked about before on this show, as well as on some of my posts. When you're talking about kids who are transitioning, it needs to be something that numerous doctors agree on, and kind of the way where any one doctor needs to have the ability of going, no, this is not right. This is not medically necessity. But I am also not going to say that it should never happen, because I do believe there are times where it is a medical necessity. And if you have enough doctors who are willing to stake their reputation on it, then who am I to question their medical judgment? Yeah, Pat, I know Philip still believes he can change the GOP, and I have to actually wonder about his sanity. Because, you know the old saying, you do the same things over and over again expecting a different result. That's the definition of insanity. And I think he may qualify at this point, along with a couple other very good friends of mine. John, we are changing the GOP. The MAGA elections have put significant pressure on rhinos. It's not where it should be, but it is getting there. And you know what? I do have some agreements there. We have some great representatives out there who are in the GOP who I very firmly support. For example, Nate Westenberg. These are good friends of mine who we philosophically agree with. But he is also very much in the very narrow minority, or the very huge minority within the GOP. Lisa, humans will some days recognize that the only way to propagate society is for the procreation of children and letting them live. If the alphabet letter group became the majority of the people, there would be no offspring and no continuation of society. You can experiment with science, but designer has rules and order. and Lisa, you bring up a point there, but we are still at a point where the human population is growing, perhaps to the point that we will eventually get to the point that the planet cannot sustain us. So I'm not really willing to say yet, you know what, this is the only thing you should be able to do, because yes, two people may decide not to have kids. And I've got two other friends who have 12. At the end of the day, I think we're still going to end up at more than two kids. We're still going to replace more than we're losing. All right. And we got a couple from Pat saying, Luke John, is Han still the chair? Unfortunately, yes, he is. And I do kind of believe that the only reason for this 10% issue, Han basically wrote a letter in support of it. And I very much believe the reason he did is who you're watching on this podcast today. He is nervous about the Constitutional Republic Party, because he knows it will take a chunk out of the way that they're running the GOP, and it will force the GOP to make a choice. Either you're going to go full establishment, or you're going to go back to full liberty. But with us as an option, they're not going to be able to straddle that fence anymore, and they're going to have to make a choice. So this is part of him trying to eliminate the people who are currently in the GOP from having that choice. The AFL is open socialist and GOP is closet socialist. I think there are some truth to that, Pat. But I do also believe that there are some people in the DFL who are your blue dog Democrats who just haven't felt comfortable with joining the GOP, and we're going to welcome those people. So, well, guys, we're about 45 minutes right now. It's a little longer than I normally do. I do want to thank all of y'all for coming on. I really want to thank everybody for engaging. It's important to have these discussions. And that was when I posted my comment or my question on the Second Amendment the other day. I'll be honest. Part of me was scared to do so. because when you show that you're willing to talk about these hard subjects, some people immediately think that because you're willing to talk about them, you're willing to capitulate. And that's not the case. I think it's just a case where we need to talk about it so people can see where we're coming from. But there is that very much danger of once you say you're willing to talk about something, that people will immediately assume that you are not the champion of that subject that they thought you were before. And that's a risk we took, but it's a risk we were willing to take because it is important to talk about these subjects. So, well, thank you everybody for joining us. Appreciate it. Sorry if we kind of rambled today. We went to a lot of different places, but thank you. Just remember, independent is power. This is Bull signing off. Have a great day.